like AI is going to replace humans. It's not, but just trust me when I say AI is here to augment. And if we live with that kind of mentality, that helps a lot. How do you stay relevant? How do you actually use the tools in the right way and start to unlock it? If you look at our skill set, AI might be able to do 80, 90% of what we do from a knowledge point of view, but that critical thinking and that kind of actually unlocking that 90% is what makes us unique as humans.
Hello and welcome to Connected Conversations. I'm Jacqueline Shakespeare, Consulting Partner at S&S. Today we're exploring a topic that's sparking a lot of interest and just as much uncertainty: artificial intelligence. Given the widespread attention, it can be challenging for business leaders to determine where to begin or whom to trust in this space. And that's why I'm delighted to be joined by Archie Cobb, our lead AI consultant at S&S. Archie brings deep technical expertise together with a clear commitment to keeping AI human-centred. His advice is grounded in real-world experience, drawn from working hands-on with clients to apply AI in meaningful ways. In today's conversation, we'll cut through the noise, explore real-world opportunities, and talk about what it takes to move from uncertainty to confident, informed action. So Archie, welcome to Connected Conversations.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's lovely to have you. So let's start with the bigger picture. So AI has moved from margins to the boardroom really fast. What's put it at the centre of so many strategic conversations?
It has moved very quickly within such a short period of time. I think the pervasive nature of it is something that stands out. So the fact it's no longer just something which is done within IT organizations, like those sort of cloud migrations or when you're sat in your mainframe and stuff like that. Now everyone can access it. It's open source nature. So literally you've got people at schools already starting to use ChatGPT to help them with their exams and stuff. So it's the accessibility, but then also you mentioned strategic. So the ability to make your workforce that much more efficient. It's one of those where people kind of have to get on board the train now, otherwise they will be left behind, and it's very obvious.
Yeah, and there's definitely that sense of urgency around those conversations. We all know that we need to embrace it and adopt it, and we can see some of the value that we can get from it. So things like ChatGPT can speed us up in our day-to-day.
Yeah.
But why are organisations finding it difficult to pin down some of the other value pieces that they can get from AI? Why is that so hard?
I think the misconception is the main one I'll say there. So all the conversations I'm currently having are around specifically where we are in the AI journey now. A lot of people think we're in that AGI or that kind of augmented area or super intelligence type thing. So they see a system which is now talking back in a way which conversationally we're normally used to. But then they forget we're only actually at the stage of like a narrow AI. So that sort of area of it literally is pattern recognition. It's as good as the data we put into it. So the value aspect is you need to kind of demystify, and that's where I always start every conversation is this is what it can actually do for us today, ground us in reality, and then let's look at what value that unlocks. And by value, people always jump straight to headcount, right? Or they jump to cost reduction. We shouldn't lead with that. It should be something you start to bring into your workforce. You should encourage the innovation around it and the usage of this tool, and then look at those kind of value levers more on time saving efficiency to free up other elements of your day-to-day work.
So what is that? What's the biggest untapped opportunity you see in relation to value?
Untapped, I think it's the data-driven innovation, right? So you can actually now really start to be driven by data and everything you do your day-to-day. No longer is it, pulling together PowerPoint slides where it's based on OKRs, which in a couple of weeks you'll forget about them, right? You have to be data-led, and that can encourage your business to move a lot more efficiently through workflow automation and those sort of elements, right? So everyone within the organization now can be marked and used against this data, and I think that's really encouraging. And a lot of people, they always mention data as the problem, right, about actually unlocking AI, but if they turn that on their head and say, right, how do we actually spark innovation within the data space? Innovation and data, words which weren't usually used to not be used together, right? But actually they can be, and that's where you really unlock a lot of the benefits.
So let's get more personal. So you're not just observing this shift, you're right in the middle of it. When did you first start working with organisations in terms of AI adoption?
Yeah, so my first kind of personal experience and when my passion came about was when I was at university and I started building out my own chatbots. I remember my first kind of proper job within IBM is I played back my personal year review through a chatbot system. So it's just starting to experiment with stuff like that. And since then, it's always been a bit of a passion of mine. The field and the movement, I mean, we got certain papers which have come out from like Google back in 2018 around the transformer logic and stuff like that. So when stuff like that starts getting unlocked, then it moves at scale and moves quick. So ever since then, I've kind of had that within conversations and the confidence to do with it. Start to properly help organizations over the last few years. In my previous kind of job, that's where I was very much spending a lot of my time, just actually starting to think about the strategy, how we're actually going to start bringing this to life. And they had innovation hubs and centers which specifically looked at how they could be front runners in market. So yeah, I've been playing around with it for a few years, personally, but then also, yeah, within organizations to help them.
And what common misconceptions about AI would you like to clear up? There must be a few around.
There's so many. So the first one is, like AI is going to replace humans. It's not. Like I could spend a whole like video talking about specifically why that won't be the case, right? But just trust me when I say AI is here to augment, and if we live with that kind of mentality, that helps a lot. AI is just for tech teams. It's not anymore because of the pervasive nature that I spoke about. It can be used everywhere within the organization. So it's something that we shouldn't just leave it there. And I think actually the biggest struggle I currently see and challenge I'm having with organizations is how do we help them connect the business and technology team together? So that's something which 100% is something I like to kind of refer to. And then this is the one which really grinds my gears, is it's inherently biased because it really is, right? But a lot of people kind of are under the perception that it's not biased because it's trained by humans, right? But it is really,
We are biased.
we are biased, right? In everything we do, and we need to be very strict on that. Just because it's spitting back in a format which is something which we can comprehend does not mean it's truth.
And what excites you the most about AI in our future?
Yeah, I think the unknown. I know a lot of people hate change and that sort of element, but I think now more than ever, change and the kind of transformation is what organizations need to be very adaptable. It's highlighted more than ever. So that's what really excites me. It's part of the move of why I come to SNS, right? Is that's what we do here, is change and transformation, and we're the experts in it. So bringing my kind of knowledge and passion of AI and combining that with experts in the field, I'm really excited to kind of see where that goes, right? So I honestly believe that's what excites me most, is around that element.
Then we talked about misconceptions that others have a few minutes ago, but what are the things that make you pause or make you feel slightly cautious about AI and the changes it's driving in the world today?
The one which people normally surprise when I say this is around the monoculture. So it's to do with the element of like how diverse is it? So a lot of people talk about hallucination and they talk about lagging in AI and those sort of elements, but actually, I use the example, and I think we spoke about it prior to this conversation, is like back in January when I was between jobs, I was chatting to someone on a beach in a nice place in Central America, but they were actually, funding, getting some money through going and working in quite a, developing country for a big American corporate. And they were literally there just looking at a screen and training up this model, which then feeds through. So a lot of people see like a, ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever it might be, a Grok, and say, oh, that's been trained on data and it's doing it itself. It's so clever, but it's not. It's actually a lot of kind of the sustainability and the elements of what actually funds this is by exploitation. So that's something which does really scare me, and it's not spoken about at all. So something I like to always raise and address quite early on is around that element. We then have like the governance, and if you don't have the right guardrails in place. So I use the example again, I was on the commute last week to work and someone was there using ChatGPT on their phone and they had their laptop outright. So they had their work laptop, but they were just using, we call it shadow IT, right? So it's the element of they're using tools out of their organization's power, but they're still using that to influence. So they'll be putting in a bunch of kind of client confidential data just to try and spit out a PowerPoint. So it's, organizations really need to get on top of these kind of elements early on. Otherwise, they will just, encourage bad behaviors. And from an IP and when legal and the EU, like the EU Act that came out last year, tried to cover a lot of this. So from a regulatory point of view, it started to get covered, but that's something which scares me quite a lot around those sorts of things.
So before you came to SNS and now you get the chance to work with all sorts of organisations.
Yeah.
and see them in a space where they're just starting to embark on their AI journey, what sort of conversations come up? What kind of themes are coming out of those? Where are they at the moment?
Oh, honestly, everything and anything, like in all honesty, around that kind of answer. So a lot of what I try and do in those conversations is just try and like I mentioned, let's ground it in the reality of it. People always have great ideas, and it's just trying to say, okay, we're not there yet with the technology. Let's not get too carried away. So that comes to that kind of demystify point. Talk about specifically what the actual functions are. A lot of people have, I call it surface level AI kind of knowledge, but it's actually, because I'm a saddo who spends my weekend actually like studying and playing around with it. I can just help them unpack, like from experience, what that actually looks like. So it's a lot of kind of that element I have with people. I think I see a lot of frustration that's starting to come. So last year conversations were more about this is really exciting, this is really cool, let's do loads of POCs, let's put loads of money into it. Now what we're seeing is people kind of saying, well, we've spent a lot of money on this sort of stuff and we're not seeing the value, we're tracking the value, right? People are kind of jumping in because they got told they had to. So it's kind of saying to people, don't be afraid to still harness that culture, but try and limit it with how deep you're jumping in or what your expectations are. Stop treating it like a go live date or whatever. This is a technology which you need to start bringing in and then looking to snowball it off. So yeah, demystify, help them with their frustration.
So at the beginning, we were talking about the urgency that organisations feel in terms of starting. Yeah. So there's this need for organisations to start on their AI journey. And you're talking about you just mentioned there, the conversations that you have with them. How do you know when organisations are ready to embark on that journey? Because presumably some just aren't. They need to get some basics in place before they can go on the journey and get that value out of it that you're talking about.
Yeah, and I think that's where like I encourage people to like lean and have those conversations, because like I've done a few sessions here, right? We do some great events, and it's just like unpacking it. A lot of people talk about like readiness assessments and stuff like that, but it is like, where are you on your maturity framework? Kind of like I built out my own like maturity framework just to help navigate that conversation. So it talks about levels, right? And it's literally level 1 is you're someone who is just wanting to use it, but not necessarily have any idea how to use it, or you've not really experimented yet. And then it goes all the way up to a level 5, which is your front runners, your open AIs, those sort of companies which are really pioneering in it. And it's helping people just for a readiness assessment, right? So you can share it with your leadership team, you can share it, we've shared it with whole kind of people in the organization, just understand what they're currently using, kind of cuts through all the transparency of it and kind of says, okay, where are you on your journey? So that really helps. Is point 1 of always starting anywhere is, what's your current landscape, right? And what are people actually using, and helping, encouraging people, incentivizing people to unlock that.
But presumably that's quite a difficult conversation to then have with an organisation if you come back scoring quite low and the readiness isn't there, yeah, and yet they are under pressure for whatever reason, maybe put on themselves or from parent company, whatever it is, to adopt AI. How do you handle that? How do you articulate the value that we can bring as an organisation, S&S, to them when there's that separation or that disparity between where they think they will want or need to be versus where they are in reality?
Disparity, it comes back to trust, I think, right? So something that why I found S&S so attractive is we built out like a really good trust and community environment. Community is going to be the front end of the next 5-10 years, right? As we start having these machines enter our life and augmenting our work, is how we can bring community together. So I always try not to pitch it from a work with S&S over this other company, because I don't want to start there. I want to just actually help them unpack it, have quite an honest and open conversation about something I'm quite passionate about. It normally unlocks a bunch of different elements for them, and then it's going from there. But yeah, trust is anything within there, I think, going for.
And just to give people an idea, what does that look like? So when you starting those conversations with organisations, what might be the first things that they do or you work with them on as they embark on that journey?
So we've got one, like I've just come off the call this morning around it, right? So the first thing we look to do is around that readiness piece. So get everyone to understand where you are from a value, a governance, an AI, a data, a strategy point of view. Let's be really honest, and it gives that score that you just mentioned, sometimes not attractive, but then you always can caveat that with, this is where it's coming from. So that's always like step 1, I think. Then secondly, it's I do those one-on-ones. So I'm literally next week and the week after sitting down with a leadership team. There's 11 of them, and one by one just going to start working through. And then off the back of the one-on-one, you kind of divergent of ideas, you look to converge it. So that's then, okay, let's all get in a room and let's speak about, from a strategy workshop point of view, what does good look like? What's our vision? What's our kind of priorities in here? And what's our literacy from an honesty point of view? So there's so many things you can do. And then from there, right, you go, okay, we're all kind of aligned with where we are in the strategy. So let's actually start talking about what processes we want to try and hit. And rather than aiming for the sky, let's ground in what we do. What's our current end-to-end, our really, dare I say, boring kind of processes that we go through every day and waste our time on? And how do we look to just start to automate some of those workflows? Because all it is, and where AI currently is, right, is how do you get the transformation part, but then how do you actually look to those, workflows of what you do if you literally think about your step-by-step, right, of getting here, and even here, right, editing this video, like what that could look like in the future, and then how you can start to help to augment it and encourage it.
So what's the one question leadership teams should be asking themselves right now?
Why aren't we, why aren't we doing it? Or better that, how do we do it? So looking for like actionable, it leads to, and that's the answer to the question, but kind of the reasoning behind it is, I always think with this is, I mentioned earlier about people who had spent loads of money on this and they weren't seeing the value, but actually if you start small, you kind of ask how we actually do it, you bring the right people into those conversations, you start building it out and building the trust and those sort of elements, you'll start to get kind of reap the demands, right? So how do we actually do it, as opposed to, that's probably the number one question.
We talk a lot in S&S about regular drops of value. So we like to realise and see value early on during any change. How early can organisations expect to see or feel value when it comes to AI? Because you talked at the beginning about, there's frustration because it might be a year on and people can't see the value in the investment that they made. So what is realistic when you're working with us?
I mean, I've managed to do it within 2 weeks, right? So you can reap reward with,
So it is
kind of it within 2 weeks. And that's kind of how I look to start every engagement, right? Is let's actually just work on a value basis. And you spoke about S&S, right? It's a mission-based work, and then kind of, your value radiated and getting value within 90 days. A lot of that can be used and applied within the AI space as well. So how do you actually cut through and really look at that value? Because it's really important, right? And you bring everyone on that journey.
Well, that's it. That's what I was going to say. Then you've got the engagement piece, because if you can shine a light on that value, people start to go, right, I get it a bit more now. I can see where this can take us. So it can help engage people.
Yeah, and they start pioneering from it. Because you mentioned earlier, really question, right? How do you get people kind of like, on board around this and that sort of thing? So like, you've got to bring everyone on this journey. Like, the reason like I'd like to demystify or challenge the assumption that AI is going to replace humans is because until people have that understanding, they will think that, right? This is something which is talking like me. If you ask it a question, it probably gives an answer sometimes better than what I do. But I always try and say, okay, if we look at as humans, we're in a period where we actually really have to change, right? And if you look at our skill set, AI might be able to do 80-90% of what we do from a knowledge point of view, but that critical thinking and that kind of actually unlocking that 90% is what makes us unique as humans. And you need that within a business and organization, right? So how do you stay relevant? How do you actually use the tools in the right way and start to unlock it? And if you champion and bring people on those value journeys, and they kind of are able to say to their boss, oh look, I'm using this tool this way and this is what it's unlocked for me, you'll then encourage that, fostering that innovation nature within an organization.
Because if people believe that they're losing their jobs as a result of AI, that's going to make them defensive and therefore not be open to really the great things that AI can bring to themselves and the organisation.
100%. And I encourage, like, I don't always like to go with this, but a lot of the kind of the results of conversations is actually, we use, and I've learned it from Nat, who works in S&S, but it's kind of like the mirror kind of window crystal ball approach of innovation. So leaders need to look in the mirror first and kind of look, okay, you need to practice what you preach, right? Because AI in theory could come for their jobs as well. It's not you can just, let's cut costs and we'll stay relevant up at the top, but it's not the case actually. You need to really champion your people and encourage innovation. And through like a number of, I think it was Ethan Mollick, through like one of his books, he was kind of saying the number one way of looking at this sort of approach is those organizations say you cut your headcount by, I don't know, 30%, right? Or sorry, you increase efficiency because of AI because of 30%. If you then say, okay, that means we can lay off 30% of our staff, the start and end point are the exact same, right? All you've done is just cut your margin, which gives you a bit more of a higher revenue and makes your kind of investors a bit happy. But what if you could cut that 30%, so that frees up that 30% for your people within your organization to then spend 30% of their time generating new sales, generating new ideas, that sort of stuff. Or dare I say it, right, having a day off every now and then, right? So that's then going to foster a much better environment. So it's all about leaders also need to take responsibility and think about, how they're having this conversation and stand up, right, to their kind of shareholders and stakeholders and say, we're not here just to cost cut, right? We're here to unlock value other ways.
So we've been talking about humans all the way through the conversation today. We talk a lot in S&S about the human-centered transformation. People are at the heart of everything we do, whether it's technical change or organizational change, anything, it's the people that make or break it. And it's no doubt the same in the AI space. So what are the values that could or should be guiding us right now?
Innovation, number one. So, how do we actually encourage and foster innovation? I think that's a really important one. Transparency. So transparency in the meaning of be transparent about how you're using AI. Foster that kind of open culture as well. So how do we foster an environment where I'm not threatened by what AI is going to do to my job, but actually foster a sense of it's going to incentivize and improve my job. So that's, I think, a key one. And then I spoke about monoculture earlier, right? So let's actually challenge ourselves with how we're using it. So OpenAI's CEO, right, the other day mentioned about how please and thank yous in the use of AI and ChatGPT is costing him millions of pounds, right?
Why is it costing millions of pounds?
Because of the GPU. So it's like every word that's processed actually costs them money, right?
Oh, I find that fascinating.
Yeah,
Because that's something I don't think we've talked about, but I do really, my thread of conversation is so polite.
Yeah.
I get like, good morning, how are you today?
Because I don't get any of that.
No, I know, but it's the way people use it is really quite different, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's definitely something there, right? Like it's a good challenge. You can ask it about. I always encourage this. It's like ask it, what do you know about me, and see what it spits out.
Oh, I've never asked that.
Yeah, it's scary.
I'm going to be doing that.
Or what sort of person do you think I am? Or you can say, I'm not feeling great. Do you think why? So there's a bunch of prompts where you can actually, and I did it with Siobhan, who works here as well, right? And she got the exact same, like, oh no, you go, you've got this, you're great, and all that stuff. And all I got was just keep going. You know what I mean? So
I get lovely messages, which is I'm no fool, right? I know exactly why. It's because that's how I'm writing it in.
Yeah.
And there's a little voice in the back of my head because somebody once said to me, one day it'll all remember how polite you were.
Polite you were.
And so however hard I try, it's like having my mother's voice in my head. I'm like, I have to put please.
Thank you so much. Yeah, like even saying thank you for like, as soon as I get what I need from it, I leave it. Or I give it a thumbs up.
Yeah. Do you know how it always ends? Would you like me to put this into da-da-da for you? And before I go on to the next thing, I'm like, no thanks. And then I go on. I'm like, I don't know. It's just, I need to break that really. It's costing thousands. I didn't know. I didn't realise it was a cost, so I hadn't thought that through.
So the reason I wrote, so they're making enough money, right? So Sam obviously announced it because he's looking at his margins and that sort of element. But from an environmental point of view, we need to be cautious of what this technology is. Like anything, right? Any new tech that comes out is how that might also impact us and the usage of it. It means more development. It means more use of, spinning up GPUs so that you can actually power these computers and these massive LLMs. So these things are monstrous in what they're doing. So it's not only the way that they are and what the impact they'll have on the environment potentially, but then it's also think about how they're being trained. How do we get that transparency over what trains them and what doesn't?
So as an individual using it currently in a professional environment, but as an individual, what's the most socially responsible way for me to do that, or environmentally responsible way for me to do that? Is it less words? What are those things that I could be doing as an individual today?
It comes back to like that environment, like it's like with your bins, right? Do your recycling and stuff like that. So you need to be kind of fostered with any technology you use, I think, and use on a needs must basis, and just try and make sure from an ethical point of view and the governance is, what makes humans is like the human relationship, right? What makes relationships and trust and builds that. So when you need to start to build that as well with your usage of these tools. When I go to calls and there's a AI thing that's sat there already, I think that's something which you should ask to invite it in. It's like anyone that's invited to a meeting, right? You can't assume someone, or at least introduce it at the start and make sure people are comfortable. So it's just encourage these sort of natures and these guardrails within your organizations. And if we foster these values and keep challenging ourselves as humans, I like to think I'm positive about what it will mean for us. Because if we don't, we will just lose control of it.
You mentioned earlier, and something that it's the forefront of many people's minds, that misconception that we're all out of a job because with the advent or the adoption of AI. But actually, it's just about a shift that we need to make, as we have done over periods of time, over the last few centuries as well. We've had periods where we've had to change the way we work. What are the skills or capabilities that are more relevant as we are looking forward, even though we don't know exactly what our jobs are going to look like? What should we be holding on to or celebrating in ourselves that's going to set us up well for the future, critical thinking or whatever that is? What are those things that we should be?
Well, you said one there around critical thinking, right? I think that's a really key one. I listen to lots of podcasts, I read lots of books, and no one can pinpoint the direct skill that's going to stay relevant because it's ever changing so quickly. But if you try and look at it from a helicopter view, is in the next 5 years, say this technology, you need that ability to be able to have the skill to communicate with something like an AI and a technology like that and understand it. Then also have the skill and that people aspect to be able to help transform that within your business.
Yeah.
The skills of looking to embrace fast change.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Actually, it sounds like one of them is the ability to, and actually enjoying adapting quickly, the ability to adapt quickly to the environment around you, and that people side of it, as you say, that's what separates us, isn't it?
And just like just ignore the noise, like having that the skill in that self, right? It's like the soft skills of just what's your communication, those sort of elements of, don't just believe what's read on the news, right? Like anything like that. Everyone that right now is an AI expert, but actually if you just try and ground yourself in what it can actually do, take time to encourage a specific area of it, become really good at that. They're definitely the skills from the business side. From a technical side, completely different, because I think they're more around, development and that sort of stuff. Slightly different.
You said ignore the noise and ground yourself. And actually one of the things that you're doing in the near future is you're creating some short videos in terms of the basics and what we need to know about AI, I think.
Yeah. So it's, like I said, I spend my weekends like playing around with this. I have geeking out, yeah. I have conversations with a bunch of people, from leaders all the way through to my family, right, to help them with how they're using AI. And I generally think, and it's really frustrating me at the moment, and whenever I go on LinkedIn, whenever I go on kind of YouTube, it's all just theory and it's all just words, but it's like, how do you turn that into something practical? Which is what people kind of, that's why I've got a job here, right? People trying to like employ me to actually do that, but I want to try and share that with other people. So it's, really short, snappy, looking at key topics. Like the next one's around agentic AI, for example. What actually is that in very layman terms? Like, what does that mean for me? And then from the useful side, if I actually wanted to start using that today, I'll give them like a free kind of version of it so they can actually start and build their own. So yeah, I'm quite excited for it because I think it'll be a good chance to. I'm having all these great conversations and people just keep trying to grab my time. So it's like, how do I channel that in somewhere which can build a community out? And then also I can learn, right? Because it works both ways.
So we all love learning here. That's what binds us as an organisation, but we're also all pretty practical too. And very keen to help people get onto the so what and how all of these great things can be applied. So what would your piece of advice be to leaders today who are looking at this?
Point number one, I've spoken a bit about it, but understand where your organization's at with it. So that's point number one. Two, look in the mirror and try and think about where you currently are, and where you are currently are, not only as an organization, but actually within yourself as a leader, and what is actually really driving your need or want to use AI. And three, I just think it's around that embrace, right? Like, get excited for it. It's you know, like you mentioned earlier, right? Humans throughout the time, like if you ever read the book, like Homo, if you've ever read the book Homo sapiens, yeah, Homo sapiens, yeah, that's a really good example. And what we're currently doing is we're living through that, and we're very aware of this change that's going on. And people can be scared about it, of course, but it is going to happen. So it's how do we actually really jump on this now and make sure our business is still relevant? It's something Pat, our founder, pioneers for, right? And what we do here at S&S is that practical element of how you can actually really help people with those conversations. So not just theory, but let's actually get down to it and let's start unlocking that quick value for them. And people love that sort of engagement, right?
So if people watching this are curious about working with you, with S&S, what kind of conversation can they expect to have, first of all?
Yeah, just a real one. Like, I think something like this, like I'm you know, always very open to any sort of conversation. I think a conversation is with no expectations as well. So something we pride ourselves in is our community, our ability to link people together. So it's not just a simple conversation and then we expect some sort of price tag off the back of it. If it's just a conversation, it's a conversation. But what we can do here is we can really help them work it out, and like I can actually challenge this what I'm doing, right? And like what I'm doing, like in that call I was talking about this morning, is actually challenge the status quo around it based on kind of my hobby, but then also experience of implementing it. Some of the wounds that come with it. So yeah, just a very open, honest conversation. And I think I'll caveat that with, I don't want to belittle others, but that's what makes us a bit unique is we don't, like even yesterday, right, I was on this call with someone that we chatted. We went to this Innovation 25 event and we were talking all about these AI things. And we had this really good call and they were really passionate about it. But they were like, oh, by the way, we don't, you know, I don't have any power to do any funding. I said, what? That's fine. Like, I'm not worried about that, right? That's obviously what helps our organization grow. But at the same time, if I can connect you to some other people and it helps your, you know, helps you grow out, then that's something. So
I think also the other thing that you do that we do generally as an organisation as well is help people see it slightly differently. Sometimes that might be literal as well in terms of on a whiteboard with post-it notes, just see the challenge or where they're trying to get to, that vision in a slightly different way, and then break it down so it looks quite manageable in a way. And you can start to see how that value can be realised really, really quickly as well.
yeah, and we like here at S&S, right, what makes it so attractive is we're not massive, right? We're not cogs turning over, right? We're empowered by our people. That's what drives us. So we are able to then use that with the conversations we had, right? And as the pace of the environment and world is moving just as quick, right? It's how do we move that quick? And I hate to say it, big organizations can't actually move that quickly compared to someone like us. So we're nimble, right? We can scale up, scale down, and that's what makes us powerful as well.
It's been really fascinating. I feel like I'm in a place where I understand a little, but not enough. And as with everybody else, I feel the urgency with it, and I feel a responsibility to myself as well as the organisations I work with to learn more. So today's been absolutely fascinating hearing more about it, and I will take away that don't be scared of the future, be excited by it, embrace it.
Yeah, just start playing around with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Play around with it, and I shall be listening to your video series as well, just to
build your own agents. That will be testing you soon.
Yeah.
It's not as scary as you think.
You can take, if you see me doing that, you know that your job's done.
Brilliant.
Thank you very much for joining me.
No, thanks so much for having me. No, thank you.
If you're watching and this practical, human and forward-thinking approach resonates with you, connect with S&S on LinkedIn, follow Archie's upcoming video series, or drop us a message to start a conversation. Together, we can harness AI in ways that are intelligent, human-centred and focused on delivering real value for your organisation.